Hi, today I want to talk to you a little bit more about the Lightroom workflow. Last time I talked about it, I finished up my processing in Photoshop, and the question was that really necessary? And absolutely it's not. So I think, and I said this last time, I think Lightroom is a program that's really useful for anybody who takes pictures on a regular basis. Not only because it has a great catalog feature, but also because it's a very powerful editing program. So today what I want to do is just show you real quickly how start to finish you can take an image from your camera, and again I'm using a raw image here. You can use JPEGs. Raw is going to give you a little bit more flexibility, and export it to basic web use. You could use it for printing, any kind of use. So anyways, let's get started here. First of all, what we do is we open it up. Then we're going to want to import some photos. So I'm going to just go ahead and import a session from earlier this week. And just a matter of scrolling down to the right file. And there's a couple things. First of all, metadata here. This is a sticky setting. The first time you use it, you want to set it up so that it has your contact information. This is a useful thing if you ever post your images online. But basically, it's a way to claim ownership of your images. Once you go to your folder, you can see these are all checked by default. If there's some you don't want to import, you can do that. If you just want to select a few of them, you can uncheck all and then just select the ones you want. But basically, we're just going to go import here. You can see it's a pretty fast process. So you can see some of this information already has some metadata, and that's because I had already imported them into a different catalog. However, for the sake of just showing you how to use it, I brought this in a second time. And this is the image I'm going to work on here. So I'm going to select it, and you can see how it's got a little bit different gray color. Go to the Develop module, which is where the real editing power is. And first of all, I'm going to start with a crop, and I'm going to go from this rectangle straight out of the camera to a square crop. And that's because this is an image I'll probably post on Instagram. So I click that and I kind of drag it and I can move it around until I decide more or less I like it where it is. Click done, and we're pretty good there. Now I talked a little bit about the histogram last time. You can see that this tends to be pretty bright, and so having everything over to the right side of the histogram means that there's a lot of bright tones. And of course, I shot this against a white seamless background, so that makes a lot of sense. The thing that we want to make sure is that we're not overexposing any highlights. And you can see I've got these little clip indicators on. That means if I did bring it over too far, I would start to see that red, and because I'm not seeing the red, I'm actually in pretty good shape, so we're okay there. There are a few things I want to do though. I want to brighten up the face and the eyes a little bit. So I'm going to use a radial filter here. I'm going to click and drag a little bit and reposition. Maybe rotate it just a little bit to match. And you can see I've got a little bit of a plus exposure. You can see where we started from. Bring it up just a little bit. I'm going to bring up the shadows just a little bit. And maybe a little saturation. Now I'm going to do a second one. I'm going to do new, and this time instead of brightening up her face, I'm going to brighten up everything that's not spring. I'm going to make it big, maybe a little bit wider. But and you can see what we're still working with inside of her, but we don't want that this time. Now we want to invert layer mask, turn that off. So now everything is going to be brightened up around her. So I'm going to bring that up just a little bit, and you can see real quick before and after by using this checkbox. So just a little bit makes it have a little bit more punch. When we're done with that, let's click OK. If we click here, we can zoom in, and you can see that there's a little bit of muddy paw prints here. The next thing I'd do would be a spot removal tool. So I click on that and kind of drag it around. And there's two things. So clone is going to be a copy, just exactly. We're going to zoom out again. You can see it copied from this part to here. So a clone would just, take these pixels and put them here, whereas heal, it kind of blends the two. So you can see that this is a little bit darker area compared to here. So a clone would make a pretty dark gray spot there. You can see how that would look instead. So that doesn't fit real well, but heal takes the data between the two and it kind of blends them together in a nice way. The other thing I want to do is over here, there's a little bit of a seam, so I'm just going to go ahead and go like that. And maybe drag this up a little bit. A couple other spots. I think we're in pretty good shape. There's actually a tool here called Visualize Spots that can give you this kind of an overlay. And you can see that there's not really a lot of spots here. Everything that I'm seeing now is spring, and so we're in good shape there. So of course we'll click Done. A few tweaks from here. We might change the clarity just a little bit. This is a sharpening kind of tool. Maybe a little bit of vibrance. This is going to be a little bit more of a saturation. And maybe a little bit of contrast. Move the blacks down just a touch. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the way that this looks. So now if I wanted to export it, there's a couple of options. So first of all, we can do File, we can do Export. And the default here would, of course, be to go to the hard drive, and so that's good. And right here you can see I've got it selected, so it's going to go to the desktop. If I wanted to have it into a subfolder, I could do that, maybe title Spring. Right now I've got the file name is just you can see down here, it's just a random numbers, letters kind of thing. I want to change it so it's got my name on it, and then maybe I'll put Spring's name in there so I can keep track. And then it's going to keep these last 4 numbers as a unique identifier. That's useful for me. But you can completely get rid of that if you want. Any of these options here are available to you. Obviously, there's no video here, so we're not going to do anything with that. File settings. So even though we're starting off as a raw file, last time I talked I said that a raw file is just kind of a suggestion. It's a negative. It's not actually a photograph that you can use until you export it. And so JPEG is one of those formats that you might use. PSD is a Photoshop file. TIFF is it's also a ubiquitous sort of file. You can use it on the web, but it's a very big file compared to JPEG. This DNG is a digital negative, and most people aren't going to want to use that in original because, again, this is an original, or this is a raw file. Just making another raw file wouldn't really be very useful. JPEG is really the way to go. And for the most part, if you have a quality setting of, say, around 80%, that gives you a nice balance of having a real high quality image without all the full size. So the difference between here, like an 80% and 100%, you probably aren't going to notice any difference visually. Some images you might, but the file is probably going to be a good 10 or 15% smaller than if it was at 100%. Color space, I recommend this sRGB. This is very appropriate for web use, or if you're going to go to the the print lab and make some prints, that would be an appropriate setting for you to use there as well. Resize to fit is a useful one. If you want to just have a big image for printing quality, you would turn that off. But if you're going to post it on the internet, then you really don't need to have a huge file. And so you can change it to width and height if you want, but the easiest thing I find is just to have the long edge setting. So because this is a square, it would of course be 800 by 800 pixels, but if it was a rectangle, then it would say 800 on the long side. So the short side would be whatever that comes out to without changing the proportion. Definitely a useful way to go. Resolution isn't really too important. 72 is a good rule of thumb for web-based use. But again, it's not really going to change the way it looks in any modern browser, so you don't have to worry about that too much. For this one, metadata include copyright and contact information. Again, that's a useful thing to know in terms of like claiming ownership of an image. If you make a living with photography, which of course I earn money that way, it's important that people be able to contact you if they want to license your work or purchase prints. So this is one way that you can do that. It makes a little text-based file, and it includes my name and my email and my phone number. Definitely a useful thing to have there. Watermark you can put in there, so I could have basically say copyright Michael Cloth 2015. I keep that off for most things, usually because I put on a little logo, but certainly that's a decent option for you to have. And then after post-processing, you can have do nothing. You can have it show in Explorer. If you're on a Mac, it would be show in Finder. You can have it open in Photoshop. I've also got a painting program on there. Right now I'm going to have it show in Explorer so you can see that. So click Export. You can see it's a pretty quick process. And it pops open, and then here's the final image. So you can preview that and see how that looks. And so there you go, the final image is right there. Now another option that you can use is once you're done editing it here, go back to the library. And one of the popular things to do would be, maybe use this on Facebook. So you can click and you can drag this to the publish service, but of course you need to set it up first. And basically what you need to do is authorize it on Facebook. And so we'll go through all of that. You're going to have to go through the login process, and I'm just going to pause it while we do all of this. But you can see it's a very easy process. Now that we're done here, you can see that I'm authorized is Michael Cloth, which is of course how I log in on Facebook. And you have a few options. So you can do it as an album, you can do it as a non-user album. I don't recommend that, but mobile uploads is kind of the default, but you can change it to any number of things. So these are all folders basically that I have on Facebook, or you can make a new one if you want. Mobile uploads works for me. The title is going to come from the metadata, so that's going to be all fine. Rename, again, this is the same thing. Rather than have just the the random letters and numbers here, it's a useful thing to have identifying text there. So now again I have my name. I'm going to put spring because it's a picture of spring, and then you can see it's the same sort of format as I used before. Again, we're not using video, but you could export video from here straight to Facebook. And these settings are all going to be pretty similar. I'm going to change this again to 800 because I think that's a good size for the web. And I'm going to change this to copyright and contact information. So if I click on save, you can see it's also a pretty quick process. And now if I open up Facebook, you can see that the photo showed up here. It has my file name here. You can see that it says it came from Adobe Photoshop Lightroom. And right now it's set to only me, but I could change this so that any of these privacy settings could be used. So I'll just go ahead and change that to friends. So there you have it. There's a couple different ways to export from Lightroom. Again, I think this is a great program for anybody who takes a lot of pictures. It's a great way for sorting your pictures. It's also a really, really good tool for editing. Let me know if you have any questions.